Hello there, welcome to today's podcast. So, today we are going to look at talking. We're going to talk about talking. We're actually going to talk about why it's important to talk about difficult things. And this might not sound initially like it's anything to do with endometriosis, but actually it's something that's really, really common. I think I sat down and tried to work it out. I reckon about 85% of the women that I've worked with on my sort of more intensive programs will have this issue come up at least once during the program, and that is around talking either about stuff that they're not comfortable talking about. So that could even be talking to me about the more intimate side of the impact of their endometriosis, or it could be about talking to colleagues, your line manager at work. It could be about talking to your partner. It could be talking about to your friends or to your other family members about your symptoms or about the impact of your symptoms. Quite often these are either topics that we're just not comfortable talking about, or it's a topic that we're fine talking about to certain people, but when it comes to one specific individual or two specific individuals, we really struggle to talk to them for whatever reason. We're going to look a little bit about the reasons why we do put off talking, but the importance of talking about these things. So the impact that keeping these emotions, keeping these unsaid thoughts inside us actually has in terms of our well-being. And then I'm going to run through some tips for starting these conversations. So tips for having these difficult conversations, be them topics or people. Not necessarily that the people are difficult, but having the conversations that may be difficult with certain individuals. So why don't we like talking about these things that can be quite difficult? Why do we find them difficult? So predominantly there's three reasons why I've found that women kind of put off having these discussions. The main one is kind of obvious. When we're struggling with endometriosis, when we're on our diagnosis journey, it can be really, really disheartening at best. At worst, it can be really soul destroying and self-confidence ebbing. That probably isn't the right word. But when we're constantly told, or even just told once or twice, that our symptoms aren't that bad, that they're just normal, it's part and parcel of being a woman, that we're making it up, that it's in our head, all the rest of the nonsense that we can hear. That can really be detrimental when it comes to us being able to voice our issues later on in life. There's a whole host of other things as well. We might have been told at school we were too loud, too vocal, too talkative. We might have been grown up in an environment where we weren't able to freely express ourselves. There's a whole host of things that can impact on our ability to talk openly as an adult, but these seem to be exacerbated when it comes to people who've been through the endometriosis journey. And quite often it doesn't necessarily, it can follow that it's happened numerous times over the year, but actually if you're somebody who struggles with this over self-reliance, which again is really common, if you're somebody who struggles to ask for help, then it may well be the case that in the past you've got to the point where you've had to ask for help, you've had to have these conversations, you've been forced to have difficult conversations because you haven't seen any other way and you haven't had the response you've wanted. So you have been gaslit by doctors, or you've been told by line managers that you can't have time off, that your periods are no different to anybody else's. Whatever it is that has led you to talk openly in the first place is suddenly shot down in flames, and that can be quite detrimental to our ability to open up in the future. It could well be that you've had your opinions or your frustrations or your emotions in lesser subjects have been disregarded. So the thought of bringing up something that's so important to you now is striking fear into you. So that's the first thing. There's three things I've got here. This is kind of the most common one, and it's kind of the most understandable as well. So we got fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood. So quite often we just want to be heard. We don't want something fixing. We don't want somebody to suddenly jump on the problem and rush out and do this, that and the other to make it better. Sometimes all we want to do is be heard. Sometimes we don't want to just be heard. Sometimes we do need a solution, but what we don't want is to be misunderstood. We don't want our intention or our desires to be misrepresented or misunderstood. And we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be rejected by that person. Quite often the conversations that we have to have, especially around the more intimate side of endometriosis and the symptoms, we worry about the rejection that might lead to. So these are all really understandable things that put us off having the conversations in the first place. We don't want to feel vulnerable. Being vulnerable is something that is incredibly hard for most people. And especially when we sit with endometriosis, you'll have heard me talk about vulnerability quite a lot in past episodes, and also if you work with me as well. It's something that we tend to look at quite a lot, because a lot of endometriosis is linked to our vulnerability or our fear of vulnerability. So opening ourselves up to having these difficult conversations can be really scary, because we know, or we think we know, that we're going to feel quite vulnerable while we're doing it. We also don't want them to feel vulnerable, and we don't want to burden them. We don't want them to have to deal with us. There's sometimes, or most of the time, a misconception that in sharing your woes and sharing your struggles, you're going to be adding to the woes and struggles of other people, but this isn't necessarily the case. And also, we're put off by the discomfort, the thought of actually having the conversation. So we catastrophize often the actual act of having the conversation and how awkward it's going to be, or we sort of visualize the worst outcome that could possibly happen. And that puts us off talking about things as well, because when it comes to talking about things like endometriosis and periods and chronic illness and menopause, all of the other stuff that we might want to talk about, there's a real fear of the discomfort. Discomfort doesn't sit naturally with us. In fact, it's a tactic that's used by unscrupulous salespeople. It's used by unscrupulous job recruiters to use the power of silence, the discomfort of silence, to get people to sign up to things that they don't necessarily want to, or to get people to admit to things. I think unscrupulous police officers have forced confessions by using the power of silence. It's a very, very powerful tool, but also the thought of it can be quite terrifying. The thought of breaking silence, the thought of sitting in silence, not necessarily sitting in silence, but the silence that happens when you're trying to have a discussion about something is enough to put you off. So whatever it is that's preventing you from having these conversations, the first thing to do is acknowledge that it's very real and it's very valid, but we can work through it. It's not something that has to stay with you. You can work through it, and I'm going to talk you through some tips in terms of starting to have these difficult conversations, or conversations with these difficult people, in inverted commas. Like I say, not necessarily that these people are difficult, just that having this particular conversation might be difficult with this particular person. So why do we need to talk about it? Well, in terms of my world, when we sit with things unsaid, they cause blockages in our energy. So if you are not specifically, if you are especially likely to get throat infections, to get tonsillitis, that kind of thing, susceptible, that's the word I was looking for. If you are susceptible to throat infections or sore throat, then that is an indication that you dislike having difficult conversations more than most. It could also be an indication that you have things that you want to talk about but are unable to. And the more that you leave things unsaid, not only does it cause sort of the throat chakra issues, but it also sees blockages elsewhere. So it can massively impact on inflammation, it can massively impact on pain, it can impact on our sleeplessness. So all the symptoms that we experience can actually be made worse if we sit with these emotions suppressed and these thoughts and feelings unsaid. So, and this is over time, obviously, these build up over time. Once we release them, it's kind of a healing energy in itself. So even the act of just having this conversation can feel incredibly cathartic. If you sit and plan the conversation, so we're going to talk in a minute about the ways to manage these conversations. But if you sit and plan about the conversation, if you think practically about how you're going to have them and actually envisage the outcome you want, even that in itself, okay, you might get a tinge of fear, you might get that anxiety, that fear that's holding you back. You might well fear that when you're imagining it, but if you imagine the outcome that you want from the conversation, you imagine that outcome as if it's happened, then you will feel an overwhelming sense of relief. It's like a weight's been lifted. And to some extent it has. You've released blockages just by having the conversation. So it's massively important to start to address these sort of pent-up emotions, pent-up unsaid words. Quite often writing letters can go some way. So if you've tried the writing letters but it hasn't quite worked, and you know that you have to have these conversations, it can be really, really daunting. But once you have, then you share your feelings, you lighten your emotional load essentially. You reduce stress, you strengthen relationships. So be that an intimate relationship with a partner, relationship with a colleague or a line manager at work, relationship with a parent or a sibling, relationship with friends. Once you start to share how you're feeling, share the impact of your symptoms, their understanding will grow and your connection and relationship will deepen. You will gain mental clarity. You will have a greater understanding of your symptoms because, as I'm going to talk you through in a second, just by talking to somebody about what you're experiencing can give you that sense of clarity. How often do you have a problem in your mind and it seems insurmountable? You keep going round in circles with the solution. You don't know what to do, A, B, C, or D. And then the second you talk about it and you're just like, oh yeah, no, don't worry. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I've got this. Just the act of talking about something can give you a sense of mental clarity and understanding. And help you process it yourself. And of course, the health benefits that come from releasing emotions and getting these unsaid things said are huge. Reducing anxiety, better symptom management, reduced symptoms, and give you a greater confidence when it comes to managing your symptoms as well, because you know that you're not alone. Those feelings of isolation are massively reduced. So here we go. Tips for opening up to somebody that you struggle to talk to. So the first thing to identify is it the topic that you struggle to talk about, or do you need to have a conversation about a topic that you're not particularly, that you don't find particularly difficult? It's more the person that you need to speak to that's a difficult thing. If it's the topic, then my first tip is to find somebody that you trust to talk to about it first. So it might not be the most beneficial person in terms of what you need the outcome, the bigger outcome to be. But if you can talk about it to somebody who you trust and you practice, in a sense, you practice on them, then when it comes to the bigger people, the more difficult people, it will become a lot easier. So work out why you're resistant to having the conversation. What are you wanting to avoid? What are your fears around having this conversation about this topic? If it's about judgment, then practice on the least judgmental person you know. If it's about an angry reaction, talk to the calmest person you know. You get the idea. Figure out what your resistance is and mitigate that by talking to somebody who is the least likely to react in the way that you're concerned about the reaction. And then, so these tips primarily focus on, as you, well, not all of you will know, but I used to be a program manager, I used to be a service commissioner, so I'm all about the plan. If you've worked with me on my programs, you'll know that at the beginning of every program we have a plan. We might not stick to that plan might change, deadlines might slip because both of us are only human, but we start out with a plan. Everything I do in life has a plan. Like I say, most of the time I kind of ignore it, but I'm able to ignore it if I have a plan, because just by setting out a plan, it gives you a framework to work to. Once you have that plan in your mind, it will always be there. You won't actually ignore it completely. You'll just pick and choose the bits of that plan that you want. But this is exactly the same. So plan the conversation that you want to have. So by that, I mean picking the right time and the right space. So the right time. So it's sometimes really good to pick a time where you have a deadline, but don't make that discussion rushed, if that makes sense. So if there's kids running round, if you know you have to be somewhere and you've not left enough time, that's a really, really bad time to have the discussion, because you're distracted, you're anxious about missing stuff, there's other things going on. So that's not the right moment. Pick the moment where you have enough time to have the discussion, but if you're worried about reaction, or if you want the whatever information it is, you want that to sit with that person for a while, it can be a good time to choose a moment where you've only got, say, an hour, and then you have to be somewhere else. That's a entirely personal preference. If you're going to do it that you have a cut-off point where you have to leave by, then please do make sure you give yourself enough time to have the conversation, because there's nothing worse than rushing this conversation. So pick the right time. Pick a time where you're both calm and relaxed, where you have the time to talk about it, the space to talk about it with any interruptions. Like I say, there's no kids running around, there's no dog staring at you because she's wanting a treat, which is exactly what's happening at the minute. You've just got time without any pressures. And pick the space as well. So pick a safe space. Pick a space where you feel safe, but there's also safe for the person you're talking to as well, because you don't want them to feel uncomfortable as much as you don't want to feel uncomfortable. So give them the opportunity of having that safe space where they're going to be able to freely respond how they want to respond as well. When we set our, and this is the next tip, but when we set the intention, we're actually creating a bit of a spell. So wherever you choose your space, make sure that it's not just safe in terms of physical location, but create an atmosphere that's safe for you both as well. So make sure it's friendly and it sounds daft, but warm and comfortable. A car's a really good place to have difficult conversations because you are together. It's an intimate location, but you're not looking at each other. Similarly, going for a walk. So if you're in a work environment, if it's your line manager, suggest you do your one-to-one having a walk. You're walking side by side, you're not making eye contact. It's a safer environment for you both to be able to share and express your opinions without that kind of intensity of the face-to-face-ness. Start by setting the clear intention. So before you go into this conversation, have crystal clear in your mind the outcome that you want, which might sound a little bit daft, but having a conversation for the sake of having a conversation may well be what you need, but actually, do you want something different? So do you just want to be heard? Do you just want to say this and leave it and you just want to be heard? Or do you want some involvement in a solution? Do you want them to do something for you? Just spend a little bit of time by yourself to work out exactly what it is that you need from this conversation. And when you've got that crystal clear in your mind, set that out right at the outset of the conversation. So it's always good to start the conversation with something like, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Do you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Or again, realistic expectation. Do you have 10 minutes just for us to sit and talk about something? There's been something I've been meaning to chat about for a while. I'd really appreciate your support. I really want you to know what I'm going through. I really need your help. Right at the outset, you are clear about why you are involving that person in the communication, in the conversation. So if they start to offer advice when all you've asked for is to be heard, you can then say, no, I really appreciate that, but honestly, at the moment, all I need is to be heard. You've already set that intention at the outset. So be very clear in yourself before you enter the conversation what you want the outcome to be, and set that intention, set that outcome right from the opening point of the conversation. If the conversation feels too big to have in one go, then break it down. Break it down into 2 or 3 smaller conversations and start with the smallest, most approachable bit for you. And it could be that that conversation happens in 3 separate conversations, or it could be that actually once you start to have the conversation, you end up having all 3 of the conversations in one. But if you break it down into different bits, you can then own the space, you can own the conversation. And if it isn't going the way you want, you can stop the conversation and you can say to that person, this has been really helpful. Maybe we can chat again about it at a later date, or can I meet you next week at the same time for a coffee? And you can restart the conversation. Then you have complete control of this. Be honest. Be honest about what you want from them, and be honest about how you feel. If it is overwhelming, acknowledge that with them. Be vulnerable, but be honest. You know, this is difficult for me to share. I know this might be difficult to hear, but I feel as if I need to talk about it. This is really impacting on my health and how I'm feeling, and I need to get it off my chest. That brings me on to the next point about using I statements. So if you're talking about yourself, it's very, very difficult for somebody to, I'm going to say argue. I don't necessarily mean argue. but argue in all senses of the word. So rather than talking about, so this is especially important if it's somebody else's behaviour that's impacting on you, which it can be quite often if you're talking to an intimate partner, if you're talking to a relationship partner, or if you're talking to your line manager. What you might actually want to say is, when you do this, it's horrible. I don't like it when you do this. But if you can focus, so it's the principles of non-violent communication. If you can focus on using I statements, then that reduces the possibility of the other person feeling defensive or getting defensive. And it also keeps the conversation open and essentially non-confrontational, non-violent. So rather than say something like, oh, look, you just don't understand how hard it is for me, say things like, I have been feeling really overwhelmed lately with my symptoms. So rather than the accusational, you don't understand, because what you're going to go on and say from there is, you don't understand how hard for me. I have to put up with this, 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 and this. So just leave off the first bit. I have been feeling really overwhelmed lately with my symptoms. I am really struggling with the idea of doing this because of X, Y, and Z. People can't argue with the I statements. People can't tell you that you're not feeling overwhelmed, that you're not feeling sad, that you're not feeling angry, because you are feeling those things. You can start to explore the reasons behind it with that person. But then, as if you're saying from the outset, I am feeling really sad at the moment, that then prompts the question, oh no, why? Rather than if you said, when you do this, I feel sad, that then opens the door for people to come back saying, I don't do that. And the emphasis goes off you and your feelings and your symptoms. So key things not to do: don't wait until it's festering to the point where it all blurts out in anger, for obvious reasons. The sooner you have the conversations and the more you plan it, the easier this conversation is going to be, or conversations are going to be. So don't wait until it's got to a point where it all just overloads, it all just bubbles out. If it's already been going on for a long time, then even more important to plan it. Plan the space, plan the opening gambit, plan the intention, and don't forget to set out that intention that you've planned at the beginning of the conversation as well. Have in your mind how you're going to end the conversation if you want to end it before it's come to a natural conclusion. So if you're not getting the support, or if it's not going the way that you want it to, have a get out plan in your mind. Thank them all, always thank them for listening and say, look, this has been really helpful. I feel like it's really helped me. Can we revisit it on Tuesday? Or I'm going to go now. I need to go now, but can I ring you next week to talk about it again? Leave the door open to restart the conversation at a time when you're back feeling comfortable, when you've had a second chance to plan it. Don't assume how they are going to react, and don't assume how they're going to feel. You never know what the people have been going through. You never know what people are going through. Quite often when I've had these conversations with people in a work environment, or talking about their work environment, when they've come back after they've had the conversation, 9 times out of 10 it's like, oh yeah, she's got endometriosis as well, or she's had fibroids, or she's had a hysterectomy, she absolutely gets it. Or it's been, oh, he knew there was something wrong but he didn't know how to ask. Quite often, just by having the conversation, you will actually make them feel better, because 9 times out of 10, if it is somebody you're close to, they will know that something's wrong. They might just not have the skills or the opportunity, or they might be too scared to talk to you about it. So don't assume how they're going to react. Don't assume how they're going to feel. The one thing that's clear is they are not going to understand what you're going through unless you do talk to them. Nobody can read minds. We like to think we can sometimes, and I'm a great believer in picking up vibes and letting vibes speak for themselves, but you'll never get the full context or the reasons if you don't verbalize them. And don't expect immediate solutions. So have in mind the outcome that you want. Have in mind the intention of having the communication. And that's a fantastic expectation to have. But again, this comes down to resilience. If you don't get the initial reaction you want, that's absolutely fine. Some people take longer to process things. It depends on the nature of what it is you need to speak to them about. I'm talking in this podcast about you've all got like massive secrets to jump out of the closet. It's not necessarily that. It can be something so small that builds into something big. It can just be something that's really small that you've had a negative experience with talking to this particular person in the past about. But whatever it is that's going on, don't anticipate their reaction, and don't necessarily assume that it's going to, well, don't assume it's going to be negative, but don't assume that you're going to get a solution right away. And if you don't, that's fine. Think of having the conversation as the solution itself. Sometimes just being heard is enough, especially if you set the intention that all you want to do is for them to understand a little bit more about what you're going through. Sometimes just getting it out is enough, and that is part of the healing process in itself. If you're then looking for them to be involved in the solution, again, I'm talking about it like it's a work, it might not be a work environment thing, but if you can come to it from that perspective, if that helps. This has really helped me. Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to go, or I need to go off to such and such, but do you know what? I might pick your brains about this again next week. Leave that door open to come back, and don't focus on solving a problem. If you see it as a problem, just focusing on sharing and deepening your connection, because a deeper connection, a more open and honest connection with that person will foster the solution naturally, or will give you better grounds to be able to suggest solutions down the line. So hopefully that's helped. It's really difficult giving generic advice like this, but it's something that, like I say, when I've gone back through notes of clients, when I've sat down and looked at something that's really important that I haven't talked about in terms of podcasts, then this is something that comes up time and time again. So it is really important, and it's really, really impactful. And hopefully it's helped. Until next time, stay well.